Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Ash Perrow. He is a near-death experiencer, musician, life adventurer, and inner critic expert. Welcome to the show, Ash.
Thank you very much, AJ. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are welcome to the show, Ash. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll be talking about near-death experience. We'll talk about how one can conquer their inner critic. My first question to you, Ash, is you have had a near-death experience. You know about both life and death. My question is to understand from you, in life, the only thing that is certain is death whenever we live. And we see this death around us in one form or the other. And so, but we seem to forget it. We seem to do whatever we feel like. We seem to think that we will live here forever. But when there is a near-death experience, it changes a lot of people. Why is it that the understanding of death in our everyday life is not that great, but when anything like a near-death experience happens, we tend to become much more aware about death in that form? I want to understand things from this perspective for everyone through your own experience. Help us understand this part of our human understanding.
Good question, AJ. I would say that for me, from my experience of actually going through a process of dying, so being in hospital and then having an operation and then having massive blood loss following the operation, and then no pulse, no breathing, I had an experience of leaving my body. And the impact of that was that when I left my body, I was blacked out. And I still had consciousness. I still had this conscious awareness. And something that was really surprising was that I was still me. There was still this essence of me. And I thought that when somebody died, I believed that there was life after death, but I thought I would become this enlightened Buddha, right? But I was me. And the experience of having that and then coming back into my body and being gifted life again meant that I actually value my life a lot more because I know how short it is. And I think a lot of people don't realize how short life actually is. And so it's easy to spend lots of time on social media. It's easy to spend time being distracted, and we can die at any moment. And so the gift of life and making the most of life. And for me, when I died, I had this sadness in me at the moment of death. And the sadness was that I was dying in a room alone. And when I left my body, I had this insight that I hadn't been living life to its fullest capacity. And so now in life, it's like, okay, life is short. The next time I die, I want to die knowing that I gave the best version of me to the world and to myself that I possibly could.
Right, Ash. So to understand from you, why is it that we are not able to fulfill all our desires to do the good things in life when we are very much alive, when we know that, one day or any moment can be our last moment? Why do we have to wait for such experiences? What is it that we can do to start making the best of this short life that we have? How can one get started? I want to understand from you. Let's look at it from the time when you came back from the hospital and start re-looking at life, so that from that point, people who are listening to this particular episode or will listen in the future can start doing it for themselves. So without going through an experience like yours, but from your experience, they can start living their life, rebuilding their life from wherever they are.
Yeah. Well, so AJ, I think that for me, I came back. So I experienced that in consciousness, I was these ripples of consciousness going out into the universe infinitely. And I had blacked out, and I thought later on, I questioned if I even had this experience and thought, well, maybe I just fainted. But when I fainted before and haven't been able to think and have this awareness and this experience. And so in my experience of dying, I was given a contract, and in that process, I was saying, I want to stay. And for me, I was saying I wanted to stay for everybody else so I could help everybody else. And that was this pattern in my life that I was giving and giving and giving. And it was me that had no energy. It was me that was suffering. It was me that wasn't living life my way. And I got to this point when I was dying, and I said, I want to stay for the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart. And the moment I thought that, I came straight back into my body. And straight away, they got a pulse. Straight away, I started breathing, opened my eyes. Ridiculous pain, like the most insane pain I'd ever experienced in my life. And I definitely experienced a lot of physical pain before that. I thought I was living my life generous, but I wasn't living life from my heart. So I started to explore, what does it mean to live life from my heart? And then, so what I started doing was lots of personal work. And in the personal work, I realized there's all this conditioning that we have, right? And the monkey mind and all this it all exists, and it's blocking me from actually living life the way that I want to live. And so this journey, which has been going for 7.5 years now, how do I live life my way? And each time I grow, I'll hit a barrier. And this barrier is something for me to explore and go, there's something from my past that's stopping me from moving forward. And so removing the past as a barrier so that I can move forward, and having the past be in the past, that's been one of the biggest insights. Did that answer your question?
Yes, yes. So how do I start, living with my heart? And also, why are we here? If we are here, then we should know it from very beginning about our purpose on earth. Why is it that when we are living this world, only then we realize that we have not lived the way we should have lived, or the way for which I came onto the earth? What is it that distracts us? Is mind our biggest enemy, or is it our biggest friend? Who is our better friend, our mind or our heart? Because both have a particular purpose. So, and the purpose is to find the real purpose of life. Why is it that we get distracted? Is it ourselves, the inner critic, or is it the society or anything else that is outside us? I want to understand from you, Ash.
Yeah. Well, one perspective, AJ, is that a grasshopper can only hop like a grasshopper, right? And so a grasshopper can only fly like a grasshopper. It can't bark like a dog, right? Can't meow like a cat, and a cat can't fly like a grasshopper. And so there's the soul, there's the body, and there's the mind. And when they all work in unison, we're creating what we want to create. When there's one that's more powerful than the other, then there's this glitch. Things just don't work like they should. And so what happens with the mind likes to solve our problems. It's always thinking about, how can I solve this problem? And I'm sure listeners can relate to this. The mind's like, how can I do this? But it's our conscious mind that gives this problem-solving mind. So it's our soul that gives the problem-solving mind the problems, right? If I'm not taking care of my body, then I can't hear the soul's guidance as well. And if I'm not, for me personally, meditation, very, very powerful for connecting to the soul's guidance. And so we all have this purpose of whatever it is. And, there's 8 billion people or more on the planet. There's 8 billion different ways of living. There's 8 billion different ways of healing. How can we serve our own soul and what that particular purpose is? And it's by listening. And so my experience with dying was, before that, I was not listening to my guidance. I was in a relationship that was very toxic. I wouldn't leave the relationship. And what I learned was I was just too scared because I didn't have the self-worth to live life the way that I wanted. And so living from my heart or my soul, living from that place, that's the most important thing. And the mind is to serve my heart. The mind is there for my heart to guide and go, actually, this is what I want to create in my life. Let my mind be the servant. And for me and for many other people, is the mind likes to be in charge, right? It likes to be the bus driver, but it's actually the heart that's telling the bus driver what the bus route is.
Right, right, Ash. So, what is the role of the inner critic here? Is it to refine ourselves, or is it to get us in shackles of different kinds? How does it impact the way we are, the way we live? Help us understand. You are a inner critic expert, so you will be able to decode this for us.
So the inner critic, which is this structure of our human brain, right? And almost every human has this inner critic. And what it was used in traditionally in historical, in prehistoric, and as humanity developed, the inner critic helped us survive, right? And as society evolves and life gets easier and we have more access to our basic resources, to food, to shelter, water, clothing, as our ability to access those things improves, the survival instinct can back off and our thrival instinct, so our capacity to thrive, can come in, right? Because our survival needs are met. However, the inner critic, it doesn't understand this. It's this primal thing that's been developed over hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years. And it's an evolutionary trait that helps us survive. And so what it does is it makes sure that we're not kicked out of our tribe, right? Because if I was kicked out of my tribe, it would be more likely that I would die in the jungle, right? Or die in the desert, or die in the mountains, or die wherever I am. Because being in community was what kept me safe. That's how humanity evolved, right? We became better hunters because we could hunt together. We could survive in the village together. And so the inner critic, it's designed to keep us in the village so that humanity will survive. Because if people keep leaving the village, then the tribe is weakened, right? And then it will die out, or more likely to die out. So this primal structure in our brain of the inner critic, it's trying to keep us in the tribe. And so the way that it does that is through things like perfectionism, self-sabotage, fear of failure, fear of judgment, so as in fear of what other people think of us, perfectionism. And these structures, most of us don't need them anymore, right? And particularly as we get older, so children, they don't understand safety. And so the inner critic can help them be safe. But we get to this point as adults where our survival needs are taken care of and we want to thrive and create the life that we want. But we have the inner critic coming at us and stopping us. So, for example, it tells us that we're not good enough, right? So, for example, if there's somebody listening and they want to start their own podcast, the inner critic can be coming in and saying, oh, no, you can't do that. Or they take a step towards creating their own podcast. Then they become fearful and they stop working towards creating the podcast. And that's how the inner critic works, because it's saying, don't be too big. If you're too big, then you threaten the tribe. Don't change where your position is in the village, because if you change your position in the village, that can threaten. And so becoming aware of how the inner critic works and how for you it is stopping you from doing what you want and living life the way that you want. That's been one of my biggest lessons, is that I have to learn how this operating system of my inner critic works to create the life that I want to create.
Right, right, Ash. So, how do I make this inner critic turn into a positive critic and not a negative one, so that it guides me properly towards what I want to do and does not want to enslave me into what it wants to achieve for itself? Help us with that, because that's the way to move forward. You can't remove it totally, can we?
No, it doesn't go away, right? It's the grasshopper can only hop like the grasshopper hops. And humans, we can only think the way that we can think. So I really love that question, AJ. So how can we make it our friend, right? How can we make it that it's a tool? Because if it wasn't useful, as humanity developed across hundreds of thousands of years, the inner critic would have been evolved out, right? So it has to be useful in some way, right? So what we do is we go, okay, I have these, and a lot of people hear it as a voice, right? They have this conflicting voice, and they have what they want to do, but then they have this voice. And so you can start to listen to the voice. So the first step is you've got to become conscious of what the voice is saying. And so for a lot of people, that awareness of what the voice is saying comes from stillness. It comes from being in nature, or it comes from doing something that we love, or a repetitive task like art, or even playing music or something. When the mind is still, then we're more likely to be able to hear the inner critic. Right? So the first step is you've got to be able to hear what it's saying. So if I use the example, it's saying, I'm not good enough. I hear that. Why is it saying I'm not good enough? Well, because it doesn't want me to become too big. It doesn't want me to be kicked out of the tribe. It doesn't want me to run out of food. It doesn't want me to run out of money or shelter, right? So it's telling me I'm no good. Okay, the next step is, thank you, I hear you. And then it's kind of like, I use the description of like an overbearing parent, where a parent is trying to stop their child from pushing their limits, whereas the child is capable of doing that. So we thank the inner critic, and then we just tell it, you know what? I'm an adult. I'm going to do this thing anyway. It's important to me. I'm going to do it. And if things go wrong, I have the capacity to manage whatever goes wrong. So if people criticize me, I can cope with that. And one of the best ways, and I'm sure you've experienced this, one of the best ways to get good at being criticized is by being criticized. Then we learn to handle it. Whereas a lot of people have such a fear of being criticized that they don't put themselves in the position of doing something like a podcast, or running their own business, or being seen and leading their business, or doing their sales, or whatever that might be, because they fear what somebody's going to say.
Right, right, Ash. There is much to learn from you. And this is just one episode. You have got a podcast, Beyond Turning Point, so people can learn a lot more from you there. Help us, tell us a bit more about your podcast, so that people can understand about things that you do, that you talk, so that they can also change their lives for the better.
Thank you. So my podcast, Beyond Turning Points, I get inspiring guests who have been through, having had this near-death experience. For me, it was this turning point in my life. And yes, it was important to have a turning point, but it was what came after the turning point that really mattered. I could have had this near-death experience and done nothing. Or I could have had this near-death experience and gone into alcohol and drug addiction, or whatever negative behaviors. But it was me embracing what happened in that turning point, and then what happened afterwards. And so I love hearing people's stories about that. And so I interview people who have had some sort of challenge in their life, reached a point where they realized life was not the way that they wanted it, and then they've changed it. And the idea of that is that listeners can come along and be inspired and learn from people who have managed to change their life, and maybe apply some of that to their own life.
Right, right. So, what is the best way for people to learn more from you, about you, about getting coached by you? what is the best way for them to connect with you, Ash?
So people can go to my website, which is ashperrow.com. At the moment, I'm very active on TikTok, and that's there's literally almost 100 videos there where I'm teaching on TikTok around different aspects of the inner critic and different things that people can learn from there. And they can access me through there, Facebook, Instagram. And yeah, so I'd say they're the best places.
Right. My last question to you, Ash, is to understand, that should one look at life as the final point, that this is it, afterwards there is no life, and that we should accomplish everything in this life itself? Or do you think that we can leave some tasks right now and we can come back again? Or, there is a life after death, and then we can also look at how do you look at your life now? Everyone has to go one day. For you, for me, for everyone. This time, when it will be a final thing, final goodbye, how would you like to look at life at that point in time, and do not have a desire to come back because there is something unfulfilled?
Well, I actually think that we live infinite number of lifetimes. And it's possible, quite possible now, that my soul is living thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of lifetimes in one moment. And that there's only so much I can do in one lifetime. And me having clarity around what it is I want to do, that I feel like that's the origins of purpose, where people talk about, what is my purpose? It's like, what do you want to do in this lifetime? Because you have so many. Just choose something, commit something. And your inner critic, it's there to help you, but all you need to do is connect into your guidance and your soul in stillness. You'll be really clear about what your purpose is, and that's enough for this lifetime. So, and for me, in that, love, there's love that's required, and it's love of the self. If we love ourselves and really commit to loving ourselves and living for ourselves in a loving place, then we have the capacity to give to others, and it becomes more effortless.
Wonderful. Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ. I really enjoyed the interview. Thank you.